Hey, it's Gabrielle from BY's Gardens, and what I'm going to talk about today is converting a sprinkler head to a drip zone, which typically you want to do this in a place where you're going to cap all the other heads and you're going to only convert one head in a particular zone. It is possible to just add some drip within a spray zone, but it's not suggested because you definitely are messing with the pressure. And so then if you put a drip zone on a certain area, you could affect how far the water goes on all those spray heads. So typically we want it to be on its own zone and move forward from there. Obviously you can do what you want. The brands I'm going to suggest, we don't get anything from any of these brands. It's just the ones that we have found over the years after installing many of these systems to really be the best. You can definitely find things that are cheaper, but in our experience, that doesn't usually pay off in the long run. A lot of times the off brands are more brittle. They don't work as well as you want them to. And so, pick your own things, but these are our strong suggestions. So the very first step is, once you find the sprinkler head that you want to convert, you're going to get a Rainbird Retro 1800 kit, conversion kit. We've only ever found these ordering them online or going directly to a sprinkler supply. You're not going to find them at Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the big box stores. So this is what it looks like. It looks exactly like a sprinkler head. Same threading on the bottom. The difference is, I want to hold this. The difference is that this at the top is where you're converting from. So you would dig around your head, pull this out, screw this in. There's an elbow fitting and a T fitting, and then that just gets very easily screwed to the top. And then what gets attached to this is either directly your drip Netafim or a piece of poly pipe. If you're going to use brown to brown, you don't need any kind of clamp. It just pops on there and you just move around. Brown to brown, no clamp. If you're going to do black to brown or black to black, you have to use what's called a pipe clamp, or the trade name is Oetiker. So again, we use the Oetiker brand, and you need a crimper for it. And basically this slides onto here. You put your pipe clamp on there and you squeeze it. That makes sure that the water doesn't leak. The other things that you're going to use when you're doing this, once you start building out your system, is connectors. So there's straight barbs, there's T-barbs, and there is L-barbs. And basically those are going to do work through your bed to make sure that you're not bending the pipe too much, that then it gets a crimp in it. So make sure and use your fittings to make sure it has a good shape. Now when you're looking at the pipe that has the emitters in it, there's two different kinds. There is the standard drip Netafim, and then there's one that has check valves. So they may ask you that at the store. Basically, you want the check valves if you're installing something that's on a hill, because when the system shuts off, all the water will drain to the bottom of that hill and potentially overwater those plants at the bottom, as opposed to draining each valve. If it's a flat surface, you can just get the regular Netafim with the regular emitters. Now this one happens to be 18 inches. 18 inches is really good for heavy soils, clay soils, so that you're not overwatering your plants around tree rings. And then they also make it with 12 inch. So this one is 18 inches, and then there's another one that's 12 inch. That's for more densely planted plants, sandier soil, loamier soil, where it drains really well. You're obviously gonna have to determine that with your own soil. And so I'm just gonna shut this video off and actually show you in real time how to convert a head. Okay, I have already dug down and removed the standard sprinkler spray head, and I have screwed that Retro 1800 into the same place. If you needed to change the height of this, say it was really deep or it was too high, you change it with something called a riser. These come in every height. So you can get them this short, basically 2 inches, all the way up to I think probably 3 or 4 feet. I didn't need to change the height of it, so I just put it in there because I'm actually gonna backfill this and bring my soil right up to here. I don't wanna bury it because this actually screws off, and there is a filter in here. So if you were using irrigation water, or your water tends to have a lot of sediment, you're gonna be pulling this out once a year, if not more, per season and cleaning this filter out, because otherwise if this gets clogged up, your water flow is going to be impacted. So you want to make sure that you can still access the top of this head. And just for the record, all of your sprinkler heads are made that way. So all of your sprinkler heads have a filter inside. I don't even know if I can get into this one, but there is a filter in here that you can clean out on the regular, especially if you notice that your water isn't flowing very well. So I'm gonna screw this back on. And then you see that I put the tea that I discussed on here. All of this can just be hand tight. You don't want to make things too tight because you might crack it. So basically here's a brown tea, and I have my drip line immediately attached to this. And I'll show you a little trick. Basically you're going to use like momentum to get these on if you don't feel like you're strong enough to push them on. So basically this is the beginning step. Now I'm going to have to start curving this and bending it in between all of the plants to make sure that all of my plants get a little drink of water. Okay, I'm going to show you how I get these in. I am not the strongest person, but I definitely practice this a lot. So basically I get it started, and then I use momentum to slide them together. So in that way, it's a pretty easy connection. Rather than just trying to brute strength, try to push them on, I wiggle them. I'm kind of flapping my elbows like a chicken to get the pipes to just basically move themselves on to this connection. I'm going to show you how I do an elbow because it's a little bit different. So with an elbow, it's just a slight bit different because you don't have a very good grip. And so what I'll do is I will just barely stick as much as I can into one side, and I hold that really tight, and then I put the other one on and I use this one to wiggle. So I wiggle it on, and now I have a good handle to push this one on. And there you go. That's an elbow. So this is the area that I'm converting. This is this whole side of the yard used to be lawn, and we slowly made it into flower beds for pollinators and our own enjoyment. So the spray heads are working very inefficiently because they're basically, the plants are getting big enough now that it sprays this way and it just hits the back of all the plants, and this stuff out here doesn't get the proper amount of water. So I'm going to be, that head that I showed you back there, I'm going to be running lines all through here and putting under the plants where I can, putting them up to the plants and putting emitters in that. You know, if I don't have one of the pre-done emitters that are in the pipe, then I'm gonna pop one of these emitters, which is, this is a 1 gallon per hour. I'm not gonna put more than that. If it was a drought tolerant plant, I would put a 1/2 gallon per hour. And then I'm just gonna run this through and make sure that this whole bed has proper water, and we're getting rid of that spray head back there. Okay, here's a few little details that are important. There are two different kinds of landscape staples. There's a round landscape staple and there's a flat one. This is for landscape fabric. This is for tubing. As you can see, when you put the tubing under it, it won't flatten it out. As opposed to if you push this one all the way in, you would potentially squeeze this and then restrict your water. So the next thing is that every one of these is an emitter that emits 1 gallon of water per hour. So if you are using this kind of tubing, you want to calculate out that each zone that you're doing can emit 240 gallons of water per hour, or 240 emitters. When you start adding more of these to this tubing because you want to put it at a specific plant or whatever, you need to make sure and add that in. That is just a rule of thumb. Obviously there can be less, there could probably be a few more, but you would need to pay attention so that if you use more than 240 of these holes or emitters per zone, then you're going to be getting less and less water. Unless, of course, if you have low pressure, then that calculation is going to be different. If you have high pressure, that calculation is going to be different. You can get a pressure gauge to determine how many gallons per hour your particular system is putting out. but that's just the rule of thumb. The next thing that is important, so, oh wait, I'm going to talk about this first so I can drop this piece of tubing. So when we get to the end of a piece of tubing that we've laid out, we bend these over to close it up, and I just slide a 3/4 or an inch Oetiker on, and then I use a landscape staple to staple it down in place. That's what I do, because at the beginning of each season, you're going to want to pull these off when you first turn on that zone and make sure that water is flowing through this before you just take it for granted that it's all working. Because if there was an air bubble somewhere in the line, suddenly these aren't going to be emitting the proper amount of water. So that makes it really easy to deal with. So there's that. Next thing, this is a barb. This is a double-sided barb. Water flows back and forth through this barb. When you're putting it into a piece of tubing, it needs to go sharp side in. Obviously this is a double-sided barb, so both sides are sharp, and then those pop in. If you are doing it into a piece of tubing like this, obviously that barb goes into there. Where it's important is with your emitter. Emitter has one sharp side, one dull side. If you pop that one in, which you can, if you use a hole punch, you can actually put that in there. Water is not going to flow out of this, and then your plant will not get water. So make sure your sharp side always goes in, and obviously the sharp side on this side of your tubing to be able to water something. I'm going to walk you through what I just did. This of course is a little bit crazy because I did it after I've planted the plants. If you are putting in a drip system, ideally you do it before you plant the plants, and then you can actually make a really nice grid. Because the thing you have to remember is that because those emitters are spaced a certain distance, that's the calculation for the amount of water you're getting. So if you're using 18 inch, every 18 inches, there's a hole, then that hole is emitting 1 gallon per hour. And if it's somewhere that drains really slowly or it has clay soil, then you're going to want to put those about 18 inches apart. If you're using 12-inch emitters, you want to put them about 12 inches apart, meaning those gaps between them, because you want the water to meet where it's going to seep to, because every one of those will seep about 12 inches around the hole and 12 inches down. So you want to make sure that you're definitely getting your proper water coverage. And that also goes into play with how much water you need in a particular area. If you have high water plants like hydrangeas or hosta, then you're going to obviously have to put these things closer. If you have a bunch of low water plants like this salvia, which is sage, and evergreens and wild bergamot, then it doesn't need as much water. It's more of a drought tolerant plant. So just take those things into consideration, and you can always ask us questions. So to avoid just being frustrated when you're fixing or starting to get into doing your own irrigation, make yourself a little kit. It does not need to be this involved. This is just how I've done it. But this has all my parts. They're nice and organized. And then I just know right where I can go and get the things that I need when a repair needs to be done, or I need to add to an existing system. Hey, so I want to show you a little trick. So I'm capping, I took the sprinkler head off because we've converted this area to drip, and I'm capping it with the right size cap, and so you put that down in there. Now I personally am not strong enough to get these on tight enough all the time because you're really close to the dirt. I don't want to dig a humongous hole. And so this is for plumbing, to change or to tighten nuts up behind your sink when you change your faucet. It's one of those tools that you use like twice in your lifetime, but with sprinklers, I use it all the time. So it flops either way, so you have to figure out which way is tight, and then you put it down there, and then look at this. You can just tighten that cap right on, and it's done.